Mr. Chairman, Mr. Donwy, Mr. Wan Rizal, and Mr. William asked about our relations with Malaysia. Malaysia and Singapore are deeply intertwined with strong people-to-people, cultural, and economic linkages. There is high tempo of two-way exchanges and visits. Since the start of the year, there have been more than 10 high-level visits, including by Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim. President Halimah will make a state visit to Malaysia next month. We also devote considerable resources to deepening our links with the various Malaysian states. Apart from the visit by Johor Menteri Besar on Hafiz Ghazi earlier this month, we also hosted delegations from Terengganu, Selangor, and Sarawak. I will be visiting Terengganu and Kelantan in April to explore opportunities to work together for mutual benefit. Ultimately, the relationship between Singapore and Malaysia is undergirded by enduring people-to-people linkages, which we are committed to strengthening into the next generation. Mr. Chairman, please allow me to speak briefly in Malay. Sebagai sebuah negara kecil tanpa hasil bumi, dasar luar negara kita ialah untuk mengeratkan hubungan dengan seberapa banyak negara asing dan terus relevan kepada dunia yang kian berubah dengan pesatnya. Dalam pada itu, kita harus terus bersatu dan akur bahawa dasar luar negara kita bermula dalam negeri kita sendiri. Setiap warga negara memainkan peranan untuk memajukan kepentingan negara kita di arena antarabangsa. Dasar luar negara kita berteraskan prinsip dan kepentingan negara kita. Setiap pilihan dan keputusan yang kita buat mengutamakan Singapura. Kita sedang menghadapi suatu tempoh persaingan kuasa besar yang sengit dan dunia yang semakin berpecah dan bergolak. Tetapi, kita menghadapi cabaran-cabaran ini dari sudut kekuatan. Kestabilan politik dan ekonomi serta cara kita berurusan dengan konsisten merupakan reputasi utama kita di mata dunia. Dalam masa yang sama, perpaduan dan kepercayaan awam dalam negeri kita penting untuk kita mengundi cabaran dasar luar negara. Dalam hal ini, warga Singapura mempercayai dan yakin terhadap pemerintah kita dan masyarakat kita semakin kekal bersatu. Saya menyeru warga Singapura untuk lebih peka tentang persekitaran luaran kita supaya mereka sedar tentang realiti dunia yang kita diami hari ini. Tetapi pada masa yang sama mempunyai harapan dan keyakinan bahawa jika kita terus kekal bersatu, kita akan muncul dari cabaran-cabaran ini dengan lebih kuat lagi. Oleh itu, kita harus terus berusaha untuk menjalin hubungan erat dengan rakan-rakan negara kita. Lebih-lebih lagi dengan bekerjasama dengan jiran terdekat kita. Izinkan saya bermula dengan hubungan kita dengan Malaysia. Seperti yang dikatakan oleh Perdana Menteri Lee Hsien Loong ketika lawatan Perdana Menteri Anwar Ibrahim ke Singapura pada Januari lalu, hubungan antara Singapura dan Malaysia tidak seperti hubungan yang lain. Tunggak utama hubungan kita adalah ikatan kekeluargaan dan perkongsian sejarah, bahasa dan budaya. Rakyat Singapura dan Malaysia saling mengunjungi antara satu sama lain, sama ada untuk bekerja, beriadah atau menziarahi sanak saudara. Bagaimanapun, kita tidak boleh mengambil sikap sambil lewah terhadap kekuatan hubungan antara rakyat kita. Kita harus memastikan generasi muda kita menumpukan perhatian mereka pada hal ini. Kita perlu mewujudkan peluang untuk belia Singapura dan Malaysia menjalin hubungan dan meluangkan masa bersama untuk mempelajari dan menghargai perspektif dan aspirasi masing-masing. Sistem pendidikan kita memainkan peranan penting, terutama selepas sekatan perjalanan COVID-19 sudah mula dilonggarkan. Seperti yang kita tahu, untuk menjalin persahabatan yang erat, kita perlu meningkatkan interaksi secara peribadi. Sama juga untuk menghidupkan konsep-konsep yang dipelajari dalam bilik darjah tentang kebudayaan dan peradaban. Kita perlukan interaksi secara peribadi. Maka itu saya sangat teruja ketika hampir 41 pelajar yang mengikuti program elektif Bahasa Melayu bagi maktab-maktab rendah berpeluang mengunjungi Selangor dan Ipoh tahun lalu untuk mengikuti kelas di Universiti Putra Malaysia di mana mereka mempelajari warisan Melayu dan mencuba membuat ikan yang diperam di Kampung Beng di Ipoh. Yang penting, pertukaran pendidikan seperti ini tidak terhad kepada para pelajar kita sahaja. Guru-guru juga digalakkan untuk membina rangkaian profesional mereka dengan rakan-rakan mereka di Malaysia, seperti menerusi program e-immersion di mana lebih 30 guru bahasa Melayu dan pemimpin pedagogi MOE melibatkan rakan-rakan mereka dari Universiti Pendidikan Sultan Idris untuk bertukar-tukar amalan terbaik mengenai pengajaran bahasa, sastra dan budaya Melayu. Selain daripada bidang pendidikan, kita juga mempertingkatkan pertukaran budaya dan agama. Bulan lalu, MUIS menjadi tuan rumah kepada pihak berkuasa agama dari Perak yang dipimpin Mufti Negara Dr. Wan Zahidi Wante untuk membincangkan amalan terbaik berhubungan penjanaan irsad-irsad agama atau fatwa dan pengurusan asatizah. Dari aspek budaya pula, dengan sokongan pemerintah, para pengamal pelbagai bentuk seni Melayu di Singapura sedang melibatkan diri secara lebih meluas dengan para artis dan penonton Malaysia. Namun sebagai jiran yang rapat, kita akur bahawa akan terdapat perbezaan pengamatan dalam beberapa isu dari masa ke semasa. Tetapi kita harus mencari cara-cara praktikal untuk menangani isu-isu dua hala ini. Sentiasa mengutamakan kerjasama demi memperbaiki kehidupan rakyat kita bersama. Kita berhasrat meneruskan semangat kerjasama pragmatik ini dengan Perdana Menteri Anwar dan pasukannya. Sedang kita membina hubungan Singapura-Malaysia yang boleh dibanggakan generasi muda masa depan kita. Akhir sekali, saya ingin merakamkan penghargaan kami di atas bantuan yang telah dihulurkan pihak berkuasa Malaysia dalam menyelamatkan 3 rakyat Singapura selepas kejadian tanah runtuh yang tragik berhampiran dengan Genting Disember lalu. Mr. Chairman, allow me to continue my speech in English. Moving on to Singapore's relations to Indonesia. Mr. Cheong Hock Kee asked about how we are stepping up our cooperation with Indonesia. As the largest economy in ASEAN and an immediate neighbor, Indonesia is a natural investment destination. Singapore has been the largest foreign investor in Indonesia since 2014, a position we have maintained even during the COVID-19 pandemic. Last year, I visited 6 Indonesian provinces for bilateral and G20 meetings. I met a wide range of political and business leaders, as well as Singaporeans living in Indonesia. Amongst these regions, the Riau Islands, or Kepri, is geographically the closest to Singapore, and we have worked well with leaders through the pandemic, and we will continue to support each other's recovery. We have stepped up cooperation, especially with Batam and Bintan. This includes establishing new data centers and efforts to develop tech talent, which could support the rapidly growing tech sectors in both Singapore and Indonesia. There are new growth areas. For example, Indonesian companies are keen to boost exports to Singapore in the agri-food and energy sectors, which aligns with Singapore's efforts to strengthen domestic food supply and security. EDB, together with ESG and SFA, have been working to increase our imports of hydroponic vegetables from Batam. To accelerate digital transformation and raise skills level, MOE and the Indonesian Ministry of Education, Culture, Research and Technology signed a human capital partnership agreement last year to strengthen our cooperation in technical and vocational education and training. MFA also supports these efforts by offering relevant capacity building courses under the Singapore Cooperation Program for Indonesian government officials. Indonesia is an important partner in maintaining the continued prosperity and security in the region, strengthening ASEAN's centrality and relevance, and upholding the multilateral rules-based order. In November 2022, PM attended the successful G20 summit hosted by Indonesia against a backdrop of heightened global tensions. Singapore was happy to support Indonesia's G20 presidency as it is important to strengthen multilateral platforms. Singapore is also extending our full support to Indonesia as ASEAN Chair this year. Singapore will host the next ASEAN-Indonesia Leaders Retreat. This will be a good opportunity for our leaders to enhance the bilateral relationship and explore new areas of opportunities and cooperation. We have a special and unique and close relationship with Brunei. As mentioned by Minister Vivian, DPM Lawrence Wong visited Brunei at the start of the year, reaffirmed Singapore's long-term commitment to nurturing this special relationship into the next generation. In addition, PM and Madam Ho Ching attended His Majesty's 76th birthday celebration in July 2022. We were honored to welcome His Majesty Sultan Bolkiah last year on his 5th state visit to Singapore. That same month, His Royal Highness Crown Prince Billah visited Singapore for the 8th Singapore Brunei Young Leaders Program, where both sides agreed to establish a bilateral scholarship program. Mr. Zulkarnain asked about how we have built on our relations with Brunei following the visits. During the Sultan's visit, 4 MOUs were signed to boost cooperation in areas such as energy and green economy, trade and investment in food and medical products, youth and education scholarship, and the public service capacity development. Then move on to other ASEAN countries. With Cambodia and Thailand, Singapore has worked closely with both to support the successful chairmanship of ASEAN and APEC in 2022, respectively. We are also expanding our collaboration in emerging areas such as the digital economy, innovation, and sustainability. We celebrate the 50th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations with Vietnam and the 10th anniversary of our strategic partnership. Vietnamese PM Pham Minh Chinh visited Singapore earlier this month. We look forward to a series of high-level exchanges to strengthen our trade and investment links and expand cooperation in new areas like renewable energy, carbon credits, digital economy, and sustainable infrastructure. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. of the Philippines visited Singapore last year for his first overseas trip since taking office. We have expanded our partnership with the Philippines in areas ranging from digital cooperation, data privacy and counterterrorism, to water collaboration, urban development, and the deployment of healthcare workers. Last June, we started importing hydropower from Laos under the Lao PDR Thailand Malaysia-Singapore Power Integration Project. This marks the first renewable energy import into Singapore and serves as a pathfinder towards an eventual ASEAN power grid. In addition to the warm relations with our neighbors, ASEAN remains a cornerstone of Singapore's foreign policy. As noted by Mr. Henry Kwek, the combined GDP of all 10 ASEAN countries currently stands at about US $3 trillion. ASEAN is expected to become the 4th largest single market in the world by 2030. ASEAN is home to over 660 million people, with 60% of our population under the age of 35, a significant demographic dividend. We intend to enhance regional economic integration through ASEAN-led frameworks and the free trade agreements, which provide greater economic opportunities for our member states. The Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership of RCEP, which came into effect at the start of 2022, eliminates the tariffs of about 92% of goods traded amongst the signatory parties. ASEAN is also pursuing FTAs with new partners like Canada. In addition, we are upgrading existing ones, such as our ASEAN-China Free Trade Area, or ACFTA, and the ASEAN's FTA with Australia and New Zealand, to ensure that these arrangements remain relevant in the post-pandemic economy. Beyond trade, ASEAN is looking at how to best harness digital technology to transform our economies. The ASEAN Smart Cities Network Initiative, or ASCN, was launched when we were chair of ASEAN in 2018. 2 major aspects of projects are worth highlighting here. First, the ASCN online portal that seeks to provide up-to-date information on ASEAN Smart Cities priorities. It can help position Singapore as a marketplace for ASEAN Smart City solutions and support Singapore's firms exploring commercially and viable smart city projects in the region. Second, the ASEAN Smart City Investment Toolkit that provides information for various options available for funding and financing smart city initiatives. ASEAN is set to commence negotiations on the ASEAN Digital Economy Framework Agreement that aims to create a seamless digital trade ecosystem across the region. Such initiatives provide opportunities for our people and businesses to tap into the digital economy and narrow the digital divide within our societies. As noted by Mr. Sekamping, it has been 2 years since the coup in Myanmar, and the region remains grave. Singapore and ASEAN remain deeply disappointed with the lack of progress in the implementation of the ASEAN 5-point consensus. The ASEAN leaders reviewed this issue at the summit in November and agreed that Myanmar will only be invited at the non-political level for ASEAN summits and foreign ministers' meetings. Myanmar remains a member of ASEAN. We will continue engaging them at the civil service level. Ms. Rachel Ong and Mr. Louis Ng asked about the humanitarian assistance that ASEAN and Singapore have provided to Myanmar. The dire situation in Myanmar has unfortunately diminished the prospect of a safe, voluntary, and dignified return of the refugees. Singapore supports ASEAN's efforts to facilitate the refugees' safe return and has contributed over 1 million Singapore dollars in bilateral aid to meet the urgent humanitarian needs of displaced persons. In addition, Singapore has contributed $100,000 to the ASEAN Coordinating Center for Humanitarian Assistance on Disaster Management. There are no quick fixes. We will work with relevant partners to scope our assistance in a way that would meet the specific needs and circumstances in the affected countries. Looking beyond our immediate region, we are working to further deepen collaboration with other key partners. Mr. Murali Pillay asked about Singapore's relations with India post-pandemic, the steps taken both to deepen bilateral cooperation as well as ensure that India remains engaged in the region. India is an important friend and partner to Singapore. Last September, DPM Lawrence Wong, Minister Vivian, Mr. Gan Kim Yong, and Minister S. Iswaran were in New Delhi to participate in the inaugural India-Singapore Ministerial Roundtable, or as SMIR, with their Indian counterparts. This leaders-driven platform allows both sides to explore potential collaboration in emerging areas such as food security, energy and green projects, and digitalization, including enhancing digital connectivity. In 21st February 2023, PM Lee and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi launched the linkage of the Singapore's PayNow and India's Unified Payments Interface, or UPI. Singaporeans will now be able to send and receive funds from their family and friends in India in a safe, simple, and cost-effective manner. We commemorated the 30th anniversary of ASEAN-India dialogue relations and establishment of the ASEAN-India Comprehensive Strategic Partnership, or CSP, in 2022. The CSP will serve as a springboard for mutually beneficial cooperation. This will create more opportunities for our peoples and enhance contributions to an open and inclusive region. India assumed the 2020 G20 presidency in 2023, and we thank India for inviting Singapore to participate in the G20 meetings this year. Singapore will continue to contribute constructively in the G20 framework, including in our capacity as convener of the Global Governance Group, or 3G, with a view to enhance the inclusiveness of the G20 process and strengthen the global governance. Ms. Ang Wei Neng asked how we can enhance our relations with Australia and New Zealand. With Australia, we are constantly exploring ambitious areas of cooperation under our comprehensive strategic partnership. The Singapore-Australia Green Economy Agreement, or GEA, that Minister Vivian mentioned earlier is one such example. The GEA will reduce barriers to cross-border trade in clean energy as well as green trade and investment. This in turn promotes the growth of green sector in our economy and creates new job opportunities for Singaporeans. We established a new climate change and green energy pillar under the Singapore-New Zealand Enhanced Partnership in April 2022. This will pave the way for low-carbon and sustainability solutions and include initiatives on energy transition technology, carbon markets, sustainable transport, and waste management. Meanwhile, we will continue to strengthen our engagement in the Middle East and Central Asia. Minister Zulkarnain asked about our relations with the Middle East and Singapore's role in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Our ties with the key Gulf countries remain excellent, and there is growing interest to deepen cooperation in areas like renewable energy with Gulf states, at which the Gulf states have ambitious plans on. We look forward to elevating our ties with Saudi Arabia. PM met the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman on the sidelines of the APEC Economic Leaders Meeting in November 2022. Minister Vivian also visited Saudi Arabia in September 2022, while the second Saudi-Singapore Joint Committee meeting was held in November 2022. We are also glad that the Hajj for 2023 has resumed and without restrictions, and look forward to Saudi Arabia's favorable consideration to increase our Hajj quota, which was discussed during PM's meeting with Crown Prince Mohammed. We enjoy excellent ties with the United Arab Emirates, or UAE, on top of our top trading partner in the Middle East. As small states and hubs in our respective regions, we share many mutual interests. There has been healthy exchange of visits between the UAE and Singapore. In May 2022, I accompanied President to attend the mourning of the late UAE President Sheikh Khalifa. The Abu Dhabi-Singapore Joint Forum was held earlier this month, and I will co-chair the Singapore-UAE Joint Committee meeting later this year. Several high-level exchanges also took place last year with other Gulf countries. Minister Shanmugam and I had good discussions with our counterparts during the inaugural Singapore-Oman Strategic Dialogue in December 2022. To signal our shared commitment to deepen the strategic and economic links between our two countries, we agreed on the mutual upgrade of our diplomatic relations to the embassy level. I plan to visit Oman later this year to take a look at some of those opportunities. With Qatar, our third largest trading partner in the region, we look forward to continued engagement as fellow small states. Last year, Senior Minister Tu Chee Hian, Minister Shanmugam, and I made separate visits to meet our various Qatari leaders. Later this year, Singapore will host the 8th High-Level Joint Committee to explore new areas of cooperation. We remain committed and concerned by the escalation of the violence in Israel and the West Bank. Certainly, we are always very concerned with the escalation of violence there. We are saddened by the loss of lives on both sides. There can be no justification for attacks on innocent civilians. Both Israelis and Palestinians deserve to live in peace and security. Singapore has been steadfast in our support for a negotiated two-state solution that allows both Israelis and Palestinians to live side by side in peace and security, in accordance with the relevant UNSC resolutions. As a friend of both sides, we continue to urge both Israel and the Palestinian Authority to return to the direct negotiations. A two-state solution requires both sides to have a political will to negotiate with each other in good faith and make the necessary concessions. The recent decision by the Israeli government to retroactively legitimize 9 outposts in the West Bank is deeply worrying. Such unilateral moves will only further heighten tensions and undermine any prospect for peace. We urge all parties to avoid taking further unilateral actions. the status quo at the Temple Mount and Haram al-Sharif should be maintained. In addition, Singapore supports Jordan's custodianship of the Christian and Muslim holy sites in Jerusalem. Our ties to the Palestinian Authority remain strong. Both Minister Vivian and I made separate visits to Ramallah in the West Bank last year. During my visit, I officiated the opening of the Singapore Representative Office there. In October 2022, we welcomed the visit of the Palestinian Authority Prime Minister Dr. Mohammad Sataya to Singapore. PM Sataya was the first high-level Palestinian leader to visit Singapore, and he expressed appreciation of Singapore's support for the PA's capacity-building efforts. Singapore will continue to do so through the Enhanced Technical Assistance Package, which we have established since 2013. Mr. Chairman, given the turbulence and challenges that the world continues to face, it is more important than ever for Singapore to further strengthen our ties with our international partners and friends. We will seek the common cause, including on pressing global issues, as well as in bilateral collaboration. In doing so, we will also find opportunities for the benefit of Singapore and Singaporeans. Thank you.